Alright guys, so the dominoes continue to fall, and by the day, Israel is becoming more and more isolated on the world stage, as now 7 months in to what they are trying to classify as a noble war of self-defense, we have 3 new European countries, Norway, Spain, and Ireland, who are not coming out to declare their undying love and support for Israel, but are coming out to declare that they are unilaterally recognizing a Palestinian state. So this is huge for so many different reasons. Let's go ahead and listen to a little bit of this Irish Prime Minister's statement making this announcement here.
Last month I stood on these same steps with Prime Minister Sanchez of Spain, and we said that the point of recognizing the state of Palestine was coming closer. That point has now arrived. Today, Ireland, Norway, and Spain are announcing that we recognise the state of Palestine. Each of us will now undertake whatever national steps are necessary to give effect to that decision. In the lead up to today's announcement, I've spoken with a number of other leaders and counterparts, and I'm confident that further countries will join us in taking this important step in the coming weeks. This is an historic and important day for Ireland and for Palestine. On the 21st of January 1919, Ireland asked the world to recognise our right to be an independent state. Our message to the free nations of the world was a plea for international recognition of our independence, emphasising our distinct national identity, our historical struggle, and our right to self-determination and justice. Today, we use the same language to support the recognition of Palestine as a state. We do so because we believe in freedom and justice as the fundamental principles of international law, and because we believe that permanent peace can only be secured upon the basis of the free will of a free people.
All right, so I mean, listen, the fact that you have Ireland sort of leading the charge on this is not surprising at all, given the history of Ireland and the Irish people facing occupation themselves, and honestly a man-made famine as well, enforced on them by the British. So it's not surprising that he's coming out and giving this kind of a statement, but, you know, along with Ireland, and the Irish typically have good politics when it comes to Israel and Gaza, or Israel and Palestine, but you also have Norway and Spain. I mean, that's kind of a surprise, at least to me. Now, it really shouldn't be a surprise, because if you look at the map here, I pulled this article up from Al Jazeera. It's a great article breaking all of this down. If you pull up a map of countries that recognize a Palestinian state, look at this map, guys. I mean, it is an overwhelming majority of countries around the world that have already made this recognition. It's really only a handful of, like, you know, U.S. allies that are still blocking this. I mean, you have Australia, unfortunately, I'm half Australian, so that sucks. You know, you have New Zealand, you have the United States, Canada, and then some Western European countries for the most part. I mean, there's some other ones here and there, but that's basically the bulk of it. The mass majority of the world recognizes a Palestinian state already, right? So we know exactly where the primary blockades are to actually achieving that goal, but now we have 3 new additions to that map there. So they say here from Al Jazeera, Wednesday's announcement has prompted, because of course they're going to lose their minds over this, it's prompted Israel to immediately recall its envoys to Ireland and Norway for urgent consultations, right? Today, I am sending a sharp message to Ireland and Norway. Israel will not go over this in silence, said Foreign Minister Israel Katz in a statement. He threatened to also withdraw the Israeli ambassador from Spain. In addition, Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said that he will stop transferring tax funds to the Palestinian Authority. Israel, which occupies the West Bank illegally under international law, is required to transfer taxes collected from the Palestinian territory to the PA, which governs it. So not only are they like pulling some of their ambassadors and representatives and trying to have like emergency meetings because they're losing it over this, but you also have them just like trying to punish the Palestinian Authority for this, trying to punish the Palestinian Authority and Palestinians, therefore, because several European countries recognized a Palestinian state, knowing full well that especially guys like Bezalel Smotrich, but also guys like Netanyahu and Itamar Ben-Gvir, and really the vast majority of the Israeli government, are in full opposition to the notion of even entertaining the idea of a Palestinian state. So, I mean, it's not surprising that they're freaking out about this, but also, I mean, how demented can we possibly get? They're not only illegally occupying the West Bank, then they're also collecting tax revenue from the Palestinians there, and then now because you have other countries around the world recognizing the insanity of this situation, they are choosing to basically steal the money and just withhold it from the Palestinian Authority as like a punishment, basically. They continue down here. They say Norway, Spain, and Ireland made their announcements as a growing number of nations are publicly considering the recognition of Palestine as a state. That is especially so in Europe, which is shocking, traditionally an outlier on the issue. Slovenia, Malta, and Belgium are other nations on the continent that are currently discussing whether and when to recognize Palestinian statehood. So we could have some more coming down the line here pretty quickly. At the moment, in addition to Norway, Ireland, and Spain, 9 other European countries recognize the state. And so a couple more interesting things that I saw in this article. First off, earlier this month, I covered this on the channel, 143 of the 193 members of the United Nations General Assembly voted in favor of Palestine joining the United Nations as a full member, something that only states can do. But of course, then it has to kind of go on to the UN Security Council, where, of course, the United States is then going to veto it, right? Which we have done several times just over the last couple of months, as well as vetoing ceasefires in Gaza. They continue. They say most of the Middle East, Africa, and Asia recognize Palestinian statehood. However, of course, it's the United States, Canada, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and many Western European states that do not recognize it. So again, pretty clear exactly where the world stands on this versus where the United States and our closest allies stand on this issue, right? They say recognition from 2011 to 2023. So over the last, 10 or so years, 15 years, in 2011, despite Palestine's failure to join the United Nations after campaigning for full membership, UNESCO granted the Palestinians full membership in the UN Cultural Agency, leading to the US to defund that body. So this is the story that I covered yesterday, where we had that meeting between Arab American leaders with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. And Anthony Blinken in that meeting basically threatened to completely defund the United Nations. And the US contributes a significant amount to the United Nations, and threatened that they would then have to defund, like the World Food Program, for example, and that thousands of people would have to starve if Palestine was recognized as a state. This is how US law functions. If these people who have been occupied and oppressed for decades and decades and decades are given sovereignty, then we will starve the world. It's just amazing, right? How demented can we get? They continue. They say in 2012, the General Assembly voted in favor of changing Palestine's status to non-member observer state, and in 2015, the International Criminal Court recognized Palestine as a party, which is why, in my previous videos covering the ICC arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu, Yoav Gallant, and several Hamas leaders, this is why I say they have jurisdiction, is because the ICC, which gets to determine jurisdiction, they decided that they did. They recognize that Palestine as a party to the Rome Statute. So, I mean, again, this is pretty fucking big, guys. It's not everything. It's not as if we're going to get an actual Palestinian state on the 1967 borders tomorrow or something. But this is a big step to have very close U.S. allies, European countries, that at this point are recognizing, okay, we need outside pressure. We need massive pressure to be brought to bear on Israel to fall in line, for there to be any hope for Palestinian sovereignty. It's not going to happen with direct, negotiations between Israel and Palestine, which, let's get to this here, because I saw this article from the Times of Israel. Of course, that's exactly what the Biden administration's position is. I mean, hear from them just today. White House, Biden believes Palestinian statehood should be realized through direct talks, not unilateral recognition. So, in what world does this actually, make any sense? In what world is this coherent? Because we all know that Benjamin Netanyahu, his entire coalition, and most of the Israeli government is firmly against the prospect of negotiating in good faith for a Palestinian state. They have never offered the Palestinian people anything remotely resembling what we all consider to be a state. They will claim, whoa, we offered them everything. We gave them these generous deals. It's completely ridiculous. The most they've offered them is like fractured Bantustans without the capability to even have their own military. I mean, it's a complete absurdity. But it's even more absurd in this kind of a moment. I mean, Israel is actively expanding their illegal settlements in the West Bank, carving it up into a million pieces. They're actively engaging in a genocidal campaign against the Palestinian population of Gaza, There's a complete power discrepancy that we're talking about here, where Israel is one of the most powerful military forces in the world, and especially in the region, and is backed up by the most powerful country on the face of the planet, the United States of America. And then you have Palestinians who have fucking nothing, who have literally fucking nothing. So the idea that, like, these two sides are going to be able to sit down at a table and that it's going to be a fair negotiation is pretty ridiculous, right? What we really need is for the Biden administration or for the United States government to put Israel in their place. That's really where the pressure has to come from more than any other country in the world, right? It is the United States of America. We have to force that issue. But instead, Biden believes the Palestinians say, oh, it should be realized through direct talks. What incentive is there for Israel to engage in direct talks for a Palestinian state if the United States of America is going to give them full carte blanche support? We're going to give them weapons, we're going to give them diplomatic cover at the United Nations to just continue doing what they're doing. What incentive is there for Israel to sit down at the table and negotiate with Palestinians if we're going to allow them to continue with the genocide, to continue with the ethnic cleansing? There is no incentive. And so the track that Joe Biden is describing here is just a maintaining of the status quo that we are currently on. That's it. They're going to continue to carve up Palestinian land, ethnically cleanse them until there are no more Palestinians in the region. That's what they're going to do. And it's not as if this is like a secret, guys. I just talked about earlier in my video today how Itamar Ben-Gvir, the Minister of National Security in Israel, is talking about how he wants to go and live in Gaza after they reestablish settlements there. I mean, they're not exactly doing a great job of hiding what their goals are, what their motivations are right now. Of course, on top of the Biden administration's ridiculous take, we also had the ADL, the Apartheid Defense League here. They said, shame on the governments of Norway, Ireland, and Spain for unilaterally recognizing a Palestinian state. This was always the wrong approach, but in doing so, in the wake of Hamas's genocidal massacre, is a victory for those seeking Israel's violent destruction. I love how they call October 7th genocidal, but what's happened since October 7th is not genocidal. And in fact, if you call that genocidal, then you are a raging anti-Semite who wants to kill all the Jews around the world, right? I mean, what a ridiculous position to have. They continue, they say one-sided measures, which only serve to bolster Palestinian refusal to negotiate directly with Israel. Refusal to negotiate direct. Didn't we just cover a story like a couple weeks ago of a top Hamas official saying we will straight up lay down our arms if there's actually a Palestinian state established on the 1967 borders? I mean, the idea that like it's the Palestinians who have been blocking the path towards statehood is just ridiculous, right? They continue though. They refuse to negotiate directly with Israel and do nothing. It will do nothing to resolve the decades-long conflict or further Israeli-Palestinian peace. So what exactly would then? I mean, what exactly is the ADL's suggestion for how Palestinians can achieve statehood? Because this shit has been going on for decades and decades and decades, and all it has resulted in is the continued expulsion, the continued death and destruction directed towards Palestinians. That's all that it's gotten. So, I mean, again, it's a big step here, guys. Now, we're not going to get a Palestinian state tomorrow. It's a long, hard battle ahead. It's probably going to take years and years and years, if it is even achievable at this point. And I've talked about my position on the two-state, one-state thing. At this point, I don't even know that a Palestinian state, as in like a two-state solution with Israel and Palestine, is even feasible at this point. Again, because Israel has carved up Palestinians into a bunch of different enclaves where it's like, I guess if you wanted to have a two-state solution, you would have to expel like 500 to 700,000 Israeli settlers who are illegally in the West Bank right now. So I struggle to understand logistically and politically, for that matter, how a two-state solution is still viable. I'm much more personally, and obviously this should be up to the Palestinian people themselves, but I think it makes a lot more sense to go for a one-state solution and just reject the concept of having theocracies that are founded on settler colonial projects, and instead just have a one-state solution with full democratic and civil rights for everybody living there. That's what I think makes the most sense. Now, again, that's not easy. That's not going to happen overnight, but I mean, really, that's kind of one of the only things that's even feasibly on the table as an option. And it's only even going to be on the table, again, if the United States of America drastically changes policy in regards to Israel. We have to bring our full weight on them in order to make that happen. And so, again, it's a rare positive update here in a sea of doom and darkness that we've been covering over the last 6 or 7 months. But you can definitely tell that something is shifting. Something is shifting here, guys. I mean, Israel is still trying to claim this is a noble war of self-defense, and we're 7 months into this, and you even have like very close U.S. allies, European countries, who are going out of their way not to stand with Israel, but to stand with Palestine.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying